1. I work in a huge refrigerated food-safe production and warehouse facility. We process and manufacture all sorts of food products and related ingredients. And the company is, rightly so, super paranoid about any sort of foreign material winding up in the food. We're talking plastic coveralls and whatnot for everyone coming into contact with it, very strict handling rules, etc. One wrong move that could even potentially introduce anything foreign to the line was grounds for instant termination. Enter our star, a man I'll call Ned. Ned was in the Quality Analysis and Assurance (QAA) department, inspecting the products and keeping track of his findings on reports he had to fill out every 30 minutes or so. For this task, the company entrusted him with a clipboard and a pen. Though to be safe, it's a special pen with a metal stripe that would be spotted by one of the plant's many metal detectors along the line, were it to ever somehow fall in. While it didn't take much imagination to conjure up what would happen to whatever fool dropped their company-issued name-engraved pen into the product, this didn't dissuade Ned from setting his clipboard, paperwork, and pen in all sorts of wild and precarious places, including on machinery and on support structures overhanging the line. My friend and the man who conveyed this story to me said that Ned would go berserk anytime anyone would move his stuff, and a place Ned seemed to favor was atop a control box of a machine my friend operated at the time. This machine overhung the line somewhat, and bordered a busy walkway that both employees and logistics moved supplies down all day. My friend and Ned battled over the spots that Ned would leave his stuff, but in the end, Ned seemed to win the fight. He carried considerable favor with the supervisor at the time, and so all attempts to notify management about this issue came up empty, leaving my friend looking like a jerk who kept moving another employee's critical tools. Very well, my friend conceded. If Ned didn't want anyone to touch his stuff, he sure wouldn't touch it. It wasn't long after when the inevitable happened. Ned had left his clipboard in its usual spot, and the machine was bumped by a logistics operator passing by with a heavy-loaded powered pallet jack. The clipboard and pen tumbled from the machine and down into the food rushing past on the conveyor belt. I guess Ned managed to turn around to see it, and his face is described as priceless, just moments before the clipboard and pen passed under one of the metal detectors, about 6 feet down the line. An alarm went off like a bank was being robbed, and the conveyor system was emergency stopped further up by workers panicked by the unfamiliar noise. Between a metal detector hit at this point in the line, as well as an emergency stop, the whole upper management was roused, as well as the technicians from the QAA department to figure out what had gone so terribly wrong. Well, they took one look, verified it was Ned's stuff, and he was taken to the office never to return. The resulting investigation got 2 more people fired, and the supervisor who had, quite literally, let it slide by, quit to pursue other interests not long after that. Policies were changed, that if employees' company-issued equipment was ever found in non-designated areas, that it would be grounds for immediate termination. And at least one other employee has discovered that it was no idle threat since this all happened. It's not known whether Ned appreciated that my friend had stopped moving his stuff, though. Some things will forever be shrouded in mystery. 2. Several years ago, I was working in an American-style Chinese restaurant as a waiter. This was a family-owned business with lots of regulars. Workers here got to know people on a first-name basis and remembered who lives where. Most of the customers were really cool, but there's always a few that are the spawn of Satan. On this particular day that I was working, a gentleman called in for a delivery order, and as soon as his address came up on the computer, I knew exactly who he was. This guy was an absolute asshole when he's sober, and every food industry worker's nightmare when he's drunk. On days that he'd dine in, he was usually drunk, and complaining about everything he can about the restaurant and arguing with his wife. On days that he'd order delivery, he'd also be drunk and either shortchange our drivers and/or stiff them on the tip. I had to deal with this guy quite a few times before, so I mentally prepared myself for whatever was coming my way. Every time he orders, he demands that we give him extra containers of hot chili oil. For those not familiar with hot chili oil, it's crushed chilies cooked in oil. all made in-house and super delicious stuff. Not to mention pretty damn spicy. Because it's made in-house and not ordered in bulk from a restaurant supplier, we charge for it. For each order, we always give one container for free, and then charge 50 cents for each additional container. Mind you, these containers are the solid plastic cup containers, which is more than enough for most orders that come in. So this guy puts in an order for soup and fried rice, and demands we give him 4 extra containers of hot chili oil. I inform him that I'd have to charge him for the additional 3 he requested. He starts going off and yelling over the phone, saying some shit about how it should be free, blah blah blah, and pulls the "I'm a regular here, I should be getting something free." So I tell him that I can make whatever dish he wants spicy, so he can avoid getting charged the extra sides of hot chili oil. And I remember what he said clear as day. "Fine, make that fucking soup spicy. If it's not spicy, I want my whole meal free." So he gets the large soup that's roughly 32 ounce. I filled a quarter of that container with hot chili oil and the rest with soup. This is a wonton soup, so the broth is typically transparent. This thing was practically pure dark red, ready to destroy anyone's anus after consuming it. I took one whiff of that soup and my butthole clenched up as my eyes watered from the smell. I packed up that order and sent it out for delivery. After that day, that guy never came back in again. I did see him at the grocery store every once in a while, and I chuckle at how painful that bowel movement must have been for him. 3. This happened many years ago, and there's a bit of backstory, so bear with me here. I had been working in the cinema industry for many years, working my way from lowly usher up to full manager. I'd been working as a manager in a small, privately owned cinema, making a decent wage, but decided to take up a job offer from a big multiplex chain. Although it was less money, it was closer to home, and I felt there was more job advancement opportunities. Worst career mistake I ever made. The chain, let's call them shit show cinemas, was probably the worst employers I ever had. They were cheapskates when it came to wages and were very hostile to all their employees. If something happened that could be explained by either honest mistake or malicious act, they would immediately assume maliciousness and treat it as such. As a manager, I was expected and required to work a minimum 56-hour week, even though the salary was based on a 40-hour week and there was no paid overtime. After a bit of rough calculation, I found I was being paid way less than the legal minimum hourly wage. So this should demonstrate what a bunch of cheapskates they were. On a day that was particularly slow, a directive came from above to let workers go home early so as to save on the wages bill. I talked with every member of staff on shift that day, asking who wanted an early night. Some took me up on the offer, but since most were struggling students, they didn't want to take a loss of wages. On the next day, the area manager came in for his monthly criticism visit to tell us all what a bunch of useless, lazy cunts we all were. I'm not joking, this is what he would tell us. And decided he would tell us off for not sending people home early as instructed.
What the hell is up with these figures from yesterday? The attendance figures were abysmal, and your staffing was too high. Didn't you arseholes get the memo to dismiss unneeded staff?
Yes, I went around every staff member on shift last night and sent home everyone who wanted to. Unfortunately, not everyone wanted to cut their shift short.
What do you mean, you asked? You fucking tell them they're not needed.
But if I do that, we still must pay them for the full shift.
No, you don't. If they're not here, they don't get paid.
That's not how it works. If we ask them to go and they agree, we don't have to pay. If we order them to leave, we are in effect putting them on suspension, which requires us to pay them. He went quiet at that, and I thought that was the end of it. Till later that day when a call from the district manager, area manager's boss, comes through to me.
What's this I hear about you telling area manager that you won't send staff home early when it's quiet?
As I explained to the area manager, if we order someone to go home early, we must pay them for the full shift.
That's rubbish. If we don't need them, we don't pay them. I don't know where you got the idea. It was the other way.
Well, I consulted with a solicitor who specializes in employment law, and she said,
You Did what? How dare you discuss confidential company policies with a third party? You are nothing but a troublemaker, and I'm going to see to it that you suffer the consequences for this breach of confidentiality.
With that, he hung up. About 20 minutes later, the phone goes again. This time it's the company director. Basically the head of all operations for the country, and she is super pissed. Right. District manager and area manager have told me all about you. Who the hell do you think you are telling us how to run the company? Pardon me, if I am mistaken, but I do believe part of my duties as a manager is to ensure that the company is not put in a legally actionable position, which we potentially could if someone decided to pursue action against us, in a case where we send someone home from a shift without payment. That's bullshit! Who told you that crap? The company's solicitor, after a few moments of silence. What? Remember that employment law course you had all us managers go on? That's one of the topics that came up. Well, this is the first I'm hearing of this, and this is a policy that has been in use for a while. That may be so, but all it takes is for one employee who knows their rights to bring a complaint against us, and we won't have a leg to stand on. That may be so, but we're not going to change the policy. We'll let this go for now, but I don't want you telling anyone about this. Another thing, we're sick to death of you stirring up troubles. From now on, if someone higher up in the management chain tells you to do something, you bloody well do it without any complaints. Do I make myself clear? Crystal. End of call. So that's the background. Now we get to the malicious compliance aspect of this story. Due to their attitude, shit-show cinemas had a high turnover of managers. Most quickly got tired of the constant denigration and the poor wages and moved on quickly. As a result of this, we had a brand new general manager who had no prior cinema experience. Now the new GM was a bit annoyed, as was Hogmanay, New Year's Eve for anyone outside Scotland. But we were opening for midnight screenings. New GM would rather be at a party getting shit-faced, so he decided that he was closing early, and if anyone actually tried to buy tickets for one of the midnight screenings, he would just tell them that there was a technical fault. As I was on shift with him that night, I tactfully tried to dissuade him but was overruled. Of course, he got caught after head office received a complaint, actually from another branch which decided to do the same thing, but they cried that GM did it as well, as if that somehow excused their actions. I was hauled in for a disciplinary with the DM. I knew they were planning on firing me, as they had fired the assistant on duty at the other branch as well for being complicit.
So, you were on shift that night?
Yes.
The GM discussed with you that he planned to close early?
He did.
And what did you say?
I strongly advised him to run the screenings as planned. We had advertised them in advance and thus had a duty to remain open.
And you didn't think to bring this up with anyone higher up in management?
I would have, but I have been expressly ordered by company manager that if anyone senior to me in the management chain tells me to do something, I am to bloody well do it without any complaints.
Oh.
Looks awkwardly at notes.
You can go now.
So GM gets fired and I keep my job, but obviously I know my career with shit show is going nowhere. I receive no further promotion, I'm not ready for more responsibility, but I'm expected to train new management employees with no previous cinema experience, who have been hired straight into a position senior to mine. Thankfully, not long after, I managed to move into a much better paying IT position, and could wave goodbye to the worst employers I have ever had. And for those wondering, while I didn't tell anyone about the labor laws, a few strategically placed pamphlets entitled Know Your Rights mysteriously appeared in the staff room. 4. So I worked for a big orange DIY chain in the UK. Super strict and arsey about time off. Absences were green, yellow, red traffic light system. Yeah, roll your eyes. It's dumb, right? So regardless of what was wrong with you, fully legitimate or not, if you were at red stage, you got a written warning. I wake up one day and within a few minutes, it becomes apparent that I'm not well at all. I have a really bad stomach, I suspect food poisoning. I'm throwing up, and the other end ain't doing so well either. I have full-on sweats and shakes and cannot leave the bathroom. So I obviously call in sick. HR was lovely and said, yep, no problem. 2 hours later, I get a call from the deputy manager of the store basically telling me she needs me in. I repeat my day so far to her and explain how ill I am. She changes to, well, you need to come in because you are on a red absence and I will have to give you a warning. I can't afford to lose that job at all, and this happened earlier in the year. Unfortunately, so my next absence could end up being me getting sacked. So after a few minutes back and forth, I'm like, fine. I literally drag my ass to work and walk through the main doors, and my mate on the service desk immediately said, "Oh my god, what the fuck's wrong with you? You look grey." Bear in mind, I'm a ginger, so I'm usually super pale anyway. She said, "Oh no, you wait there. I'm getting Lisa, who was just a department manager there." Lisa then took one look at me and demanded that I come with her straight upstairs to the manager's office. She takes me directly to the store manager, has me explain to him, and he is fuming that I've been called in. He asks Lisa to immediately drive me home. I'm walking back down with Lisa through the shop floor, and lo and behold, there's the deputy who made me come in. It's at this moment, 20 feet from the paint mix desk, that my sickness bug came rushing back. I literally ran for the paint desk, closest bin basically, and due to the force of the vomit, I literally could not keep my head down. I projectile vomited like the motherfucking exorcist gal all over the desk, all over the cans of paint, all over the mix machine. Everywhere. I look up trying to catch my breath, and there's the deputy with this look of sheer horror on her face. Literally, the only sound is the store radio and dripping vomit. The store manager appeared a few seconds later and immediately looks over at deputy and says, "You better get a mop and I'll speak to you in my office once you're done. Lisa, please take Sarah home." You see, Lisa was the manager of the paint department, so she got a nice half an hour out of work helping a colleague. And the shitty deputy had to stay and clean my sick off Lisa's paint desk. Lisa told me the next day she was still cleaning the desk when Lisa got back from dropping me off, and the deputy got a serious bollocking from the store manager and a written warning for professional misconduct. Sweet karma. So glad now that I complied with her demands that I turn up. It was worth dragging my ass up there to get her put in her place. 5. So this happened a few years ago, and I'm going to have to keep some parts vague, as the officer in question is still a serving member of the British Armed Forces. When I was in the army, I worked with one boss, a sergeant most days. He had to go on a long course, meaning all of his responsibilities for 3 months were passed down to me, a private. It sounds ridiculous. However, it worked nicely, and other sergeants from other troops would help me out and pick up a bit of his slack. I was tasked with organizing transport in vehicles for an entire squadron for 5 weeks. This including making sure vehicles were fit to travel and stay out for 5 weeks, and fuel for generators to run a comms HQ. Everything was running perfectly with 4 days to go on the Thursday before we left. All the vehicles were lined up neatly on the parade square. All the equipment was loaded safely and accounted for. I had done my inspections, and had a sergeant do a second one, so we were both happy, and had a 7,000-litre fuel tanker full and ready for the 5 weeks up there. There was an officer in charge of this exercise who felt the need to always prove himself to people. He came up and was immediately annoyed I had a fuel tanker. He said it would get stuck and wanted packed fuel instead. Totally ignoring my opinion as a professional driver, he insisted we take packed fuel, and insisted we could carry enough fuel on one truck. He also said he sent an email to my boss's account to tell me a fortnight ago. I can't read my boss's emails. This was a bollock, to say the least. Massively difficult to get this much fuel on short notice. But I pulled in a few favors and made it happen. We had a truck full of 20-litre jerry cans and 5,600 litres of fuel. We needed about 185 litres a day. That's about 6,500 total. But I didn't tell him that. He was pleased as punch that he got his way. The officer left in the first packet of vehicles, and I went back down to my office and sent an email to him, explaining the fuel shortage situation, knowing he wouldn't see it until he got back. Fast forward to the last week of the exercise with about 3 days to go. I'm sat playing PS2 with one of the electricians, when this officer comes bursting in and shouting, "Where the fuck is the fuel delivery from this morning?"
The generators are about to shut down, and Chief of Staff is here in 3 hours fucking time!
I didn't know this, but apparently it was organized for the Chief of Staff to come down and view our comms HQ. This only sweetens the malicious complaints. There is no fuel. We ran out yesterday. Sir, you insisted on taking packed fuel instead of a tanker. The 6T trucks cannot take enough fuel for this exercise. I tried telling you and even sent you an email. Cue the smuggest look of my entire life.
Cunt!
The fuel tanker I organized arrived about 1.5 hours later. That I planned to top the generators up and our fuel tanks, so that vehicles can drive back and we had enough fuel for the rest of the exercise. Literally just in time for the Chief of Staff visit. That was the best 1.5 hours of my life. Watching this shitbag officer shouting and stressing at everyone, and spitting feathers because he knew he fucked up. I wasn't going to allow an entire squadron to look stupid on account of one idiot, so I did go against the compliance a little bit, but at the end of this whole 5-week drama, I got a commendation for my efforts, and said officer made himself look like a total twat in front of an entire squadron. And once they heard what happened, the entire regiment. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Revenge is Ice Cream, episode 17. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Well, I hope everyone's having a nice weekend. I believe by the time you guys get this, it should be Sunday. Yeah, Sunday. I'll just be wrapping up my week off. Hopefully it's been lots of wiggly toe action and relaxing, but not too much relaxing. Hopefully I've gotten myself back into an exercising routine just a few days a week. Okay, and with that I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.